She used to love me until I took her to a dance. She used to love me, but now I've lost my big romance. She was a good girl, and I can never understand. Why did she fall the leader of the band? She felt completely. She had to get his autograph, and very sweetly she handed me the horse's laugh. She was a good girl, and I can never understand. Why did she fall the leader of the band?
You can see them in the musical trade papers of the 30s, in the sepia pages of the radio fan magazines. Glossy young men, with their hair brushed back and their mouths fixed in a confident grin. At play, they're on the golf links, oblong-shaped in their +4s and Fair Isle sweaters. At work, it's white tie and tails, easily, casually worn, as befits a man who owns instead of hires. But the hand which gripped the mashie now holds a conductor's baton. He doesn't know how to use it properly, but it's his badge of office. Charming, ageless, sleekly hair-oiled. Who were they? The band leaders of the 1930s, the superstars of a golden age.
I was always a bit of a gay bloke, and like the announcer do, that they speak very quickly. Well, I did then. And I go, oh, skillyway, hey, anything, you see. Anything that came to my head.
One of the undoubted superstars, Harry Roy, the original Hotchama-Chotcha Kid.
Somebody stole my gal. Somebody stole my belle. Somebody came and took her away. She didn't even say that she was leaving. All the kisses, I love them so. The kisses, now I know. Oh, gee, I know that if she saw me broken-hearted, I am just a lonesome pal. Somebody stole my gal.
On the bandstand, Harry Roy coupled an air of high spirits with a hint of Little Boy Lost, which the female fans, from typist to princess, found irresistible. With a different kind of appeal, elegant, even a bit starchy, but essentially cool, Roy Fox. You needed style to front a band successfully in those days, flair too, and good luck. But above all, money sense. You had to be a good businessman. Also, as Roy Fox recalls, you needed to be able to work and work and work.
I was in the West End. We kept a pair of these different clubs, and then we decided to go out into variety with our stage show. Variety was a most marvelous thing because we were always booked at least a year in advance. So I had to carry a staff of arrangers with me. Aside from our playing on the stage, for instance, if I was at the Palladium with my band, we would also double at maybe Kingston Empire or some other house, and that meant 4 shows a night. We'd have a coach standing by to take the band back and forth, and of course a lot of times we nearly didn't make it on account of so much fog at the time. But all right, we'll say that's 4 shows a night. We would record every week for Decca, which required rehearsing and arrangements. We broadcast every Wednesday night. We would play a Sunday concert every Sunday, or practically every Sunday. And I suppose on the average of 2 late-night dances a week. We'd go out to Streatham and play in the Mecca Hall or wherever it might be, and and they were called late-night dances at that time. We'd finish the theater, get out there, and we'd start playing from, say, 12 till 3.
No doubt about it, a hard life, not least for the players. Jock Jacobson was one of the leading drummers in those days.
We earned good money, but we worked for it. I mean, for instance, 1 week's work, for instance, with Lou Stone's band, we might be we were doubling at the Astoria, maybe, like when they had Cine Variety at the Brixton Astoria. Then we'd go maybe do some one-night stands, maybe at the Hammersmith Palladio Dance or somewhere like that. And then we'd record during the daytime as well, maybe in the morning. And then every Tuesday night, we used to do the hour-and-a-half Bluestone broadcast, and that was tough going.
Nat Temple was with Harry Roy's band in the 1930s.
In those days, the jazz musician on the saxophone and clarinet, which were Harry's instruments, you were quite a genius if you could make a noise that sounded like a human laugh, or if you could slap tongue, which was a sort of bringing your tongue very hard against the reed and making it sound like that sort of thing, allied with notes, of course. And you were very clever. You took a break on that, and gee, everybody was mad. You know, feet used to kick all over the place on the ballroom floor, and it was wonderful. And Harry could do that very well. He could laugh, he could flutter. Well, that's another one. Do you know what a flutter is? You go like, you know, sounded fierce, coloured, I suppose, you know. Another thing, he could hold his saxophone up in the air and play with it sort of facing heaven, you know, standing on your head. That type of showmanship was allied very closely with the jazz of those days. You were all mad. It was wonderful, though.
Getting a start was the problem, and in those days there was really only one place for the beginner to go, a back street behind Piccadilly Circus called Archer Street. Every afternoon, especially Mondays, literally hundreds of musicians crammed into that scruffy street, hoping for work. A resident job preferably, but perhaps a gig, a one-night engagement. Jock Jacobson remembers it well.
Yes, sir, I certainly do. I stood out there many a time in Archer Street waiting for somebody to come up and give me a gig, and they say, what are you doing next Thursday night? I say, I'm not doing anything at the moment. And I take out my diary and write it down. And after we'd done our business, we'd go down this little cafe there, and they had a billiard table, and then we'd all play snooker and so on and so forth. But of course, that's all finished now.
Tiny Winters played double bass for Ambrose, Roy Fox and Lou Stone. His musical life, too, began down the street.
When I first went down to Archer Street, I was terrified. I remember walking in one end and walking through these masses of people, and I came out the other end, and of course I'd have achieved nothing at all. You can't very well go up to a stranger and say, hello, you know, I'm a musician. He'll look at you as if you've gone raving mad, because you had to have somehow, you had to get a contact, you know, someone you knew. Well, as it happened, I had got my first job through an agency in Cecil Court, and I paid £0.50, I think it was, to join this, and they asked me to go and do an audition, which I did, and I refused to go and do the job because there was some straight music in it, you see, and I didn't want to play straight music, but the fella finally convinced me. So I went up to Bridlington for the season, and that was my first professional job. Well, I did meet musicians there, and then I went to Archer Street, and I did fall on one of these chaps' necks in the Archer Street, and I said, hello, you know, and then through that I got round to meeting other people in Archer Street, and that's how I sort of got friendly with them, and I started getting gigs. Fellas went among the crowd, like some fella might know a friend who was running a dance and he'd want a band, so he would go down Archer Street and book this one band. That was probably, he might only book one band in a year, and it might even be for that night. That particular night, say, well, rush home and do the job. One of the funniest things ever happened to me. I mean, probably you've got to be a musician to appreciate it, but there's all these fellas all standing about in groups, all busy talking, you see, and a stranger, well, when I say a stranger, a citizen, as it were, was walking by, and he saw all this crowd, and he came up to this friend of mine and myself, and he said, what happened?
Musicians' humour. In those days it wasn't enough to be the best bass player around, and by the way Tiny Winters was. You had to be an entertainer too, and Tiny became famous throughout Britain as Little Nell with Lou Stone's band. 10:30 Tuesday night, week after week, month after month. The musicians must have been sick to death of it.
Who's there a-knocking at me door?
It's your little Nell, don't you know me anymore?
What happened to that actor guy that used to call you honey? Did he send you home when you hadn't any money?
He was a West End guy, and he could lie with ease, and he had more money than the dog has fleas. He left me on the night when I was most forlorn. The very, very night little Dumbbell was born.
Is that there, dummy?
Well, it ain't no other.
Is the very spitting image of his darn mother. But you can't live in this house with that there child.
Father dear, you're driving me wild. But I'll get that guy who calls me all his shame. So mean he wouldn't even give his child a middle nut.
The dance band business in Britain bred a surprising number of brothers. Many of them looked alike, which was useful when there were two bands out on the same evening, each boasting a personal appearance by the bandleader. Maurice Winnick was able to appear simultaneously in Plymouth and Dundee, thanks to his brother's family likeness. There was the Staritas, the Furmans, and of course Harry and Sid Roy. Harry was originally resident comic with brother Sid's band, the Lyricals.
I was a dancer, a tumbler. We went to Africa and Australia, and I got all the ride-ups, and I used to wear a little bowler hat. But everywhere we played in South Africa and Australia, I was the only one who got this applause. Never went to my head. And then in the 30s, my brother said to me, well, it's about time you became the band leader and I'd be your agent.
Those were the days of cine variety, when feature films were almost secondary to a full stage entertainment, often by a top dance band. Nat Temple recalls an audition the band gave.
We gave the audition at the Leicester Square Theatre, and the audition was given on a very cold stage. I think it was about 15 people in the band, with Sid Roy standing in front. And there was a sort of cold atmosphere. It was a murky stalls. You couldn't see really who was out there. There couldn't have been many people. Sort of empty theatre. And we weren't going well. And, you know, if you're not going well, you can sense it, and it just wasn't any good. And then they suggested, they called Sid aside, and obviously were telling him not to be worried about it, but they wanted to see Harry Roy, instead of Sid, in front of the same band. Well, Harry knew from nothing, really, so he just emerged and got on the stage in front of the band, and of course all his showmanship and his energy were immediately obvious, and we got the audition, and that's how it became Harry Roy's band, and that was it.
The immaculate Roy Fox, who looked as tall in tails as Jack Buchanan, arrived in Britain with a reputation already established on the other side of the Atlantic.
At the time, I was the head of the musical production department of 20th Century Fox Films. And one day I received a cable asking if I'd like to bring my American band to the Café Perry in London. Well, I knew that Abe Lyman, who was the band leader that had the band that I first joined when I was about 16 years old, I knew that Abe had been to London and could tell me something about it. So I went to him. He was at the Carthay Circle Theatre, who's only about half a block from my home in Beverly Hills, and showed him the cable. He said, well, Roy, that's the #1 spot in London. So he arranged for me through his personal manager to send a cable and clinch the deal. And I came over to London at that time with my American band. But while I was at the Café de Paris, Mr. Lewis of Decca heard my band and asked me if I would like to stay and form an all-British band and teach the British boys how we played American dance music. That meant that I had to send my American band back to Hollywood, and I stayed here and formed a British band.
The main problem was in keeping up with your own schedule. One-night stands, personal appearances, recording sessions, broadcasts. The administrative problems were something like those that might face a football team trying to cover 3 or 4 matches a day. But the thing that mattered most was radio. That was where your reputation was made on the air.
In 1932, nearly 1933, we went to Café Anglais. And one of the BBC blokes came in, Gerald Cock, and said, I like the band, I like the broadcast. And we made a big hit. In the first week or the second week, we got 1,000 letters a week. We then stayed 9 months. Then we went to the Mayfair Hotel, where we did every Friday night for 3.5 or 4 years, hour and a half from 10:30 to 12 o'clock, and changed every week 20 numbers, which was hard going. And then we made such a great success, getting 2,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 letters a week. We then asked to play Saturday afternoons, and we did a 3/4 of an hour Saturday afternoons. That went on for years. The BBC paid the boys, if I can recollect, £1 a man, 18p's, and £2 for me. So they didn't pay a lot of money, but it was the broadcast that made us. The broadcasting made Harry Roy and his band.
Most of the star bands made their names through broadcasting and later went out on the road, cashing in on their radio fame. Jack Payne was the classic example.
Alibaba's camel loved Alibaba so. No matter where he went to, the camel had to go. They say he's now in heaven, but this I know is true. Wherever Alibaba's gone, his camel's gone there too.
Jack Payne singing there with his own band. Jack Payne, who became so famous through radio that he would have been crazy to resist any longer the pressure to cash in through music hall tours. But one band leader did it rather the other way round, Jack Hilton. His real home was the Variety Theatre, where his band played against fabulous scenic backgrounds. Racehorses dashed across the stage, naval cannon fired, even aeroplanes played their part in the Hilton Spectacular. And when Britain's heart swelled with national pride, Hilton's bank balance swelled in sympathy.
Who has captured every heart, Amy Johnson, it's you. We have watched and waited since the day you made your start, Amy Johnson, it's true. Since the news that you are safe has come along, everyone in town is singing this love song. Amy, wonderful Amy, how can you blame me for loving you? Since you've won the praise of every nation, you have filled my heart with admiration.
You couldn't effectively broadcast a Hilton stage show, and Jack Hilton was never one of the top 4 or 5 radio band leaders. Mind you, the top ones had trouble occasionally with the third floor, as it was then and still is, here in Broadcasting House. Listen to Nat Temple, who was with Harry Roy on 1,000 eventful broadcasts.
Harry did the unheard of thing, which was instead of just playing and the announcer saying, or band leader, I think he used to speak then, would say, and now we're going to play, and the next number's a waltz, and then this and that. Harry started clowning about. And the clowning was the sort of thing that would, if he'd have done it at rehearsal before we went on the air, he would have been taken off. But they couldn't very well do that whilst it was going on, and he did the most outrageous things. He took off sort of sissy type of conversation and larking about with the boys individually, put the personality into the BBC show, and this went like a bomb.
Having made your name in broadcasting, your subsequent nationwide tour was apt to be something like a royal progress. Sellouts inside the theatre, traffic-stopping crowds outside. Jock Jacobson toured with Lou Stone.
There was fan worship in those days. I mean, when we used to go on tour with Lou, when we used to get to, as we might be playing the Empire Theatre Glasgow, we would arrive in on the Sunday. That's when we went by train. It was not very often that we did go by train, but when we did, there'd be a whole packed crowd there waiting on the stage for us. When we came out the stage door, they'd be waiting at the stage door. All had their particular favourites. I had one of my favourites in particular was, I can't think of don't remember their names, but they used to when we used to broadcast, which is every Tuesday night from 10:30 to 12, it's Lord and Lady or the Earl of somebody in Ireland. She used to record my drum breaks and then used to discuss them with me. Wherever we might have been in any part of England, we were entertained by the best. We had followers, not they were nice people, they're real fine people, you know, that used to invite us to their homes, and sometimes we used to go to estates, like in Leeds. Once went into a house, it was just out of this world. We sat down, there were butlers there and all that. They were just fans of the band, you know.
Lou Stone's band, and Lou was probably the best actual musician among those top radio band leaders. Unlike the others, he did his own orchestrations, something that Jack Hilton, for instance, could never have done, nor with Billy Ternant around, needed to do. As a top band leader, you never knew who you were going to meet next. Harry Roy played at a society function in Melton Mowbray, centre of the Hunt Ball circuit.
I was in my brother's band then, and we used to go there every weekend from the Cafety Parry. We used to play the Cafety Parry. And every Friday we used to go to Melton Mowbray, play there Friday nights, Saturday night, Sunday night. And it was the most amazing days in my whole life, because the women that were dressed so beautiful and young, and the Prince of Wales, mind you, was young too, and I was young too. And we were larking about, waiting to play again. And the Prince of Wales walked in the ballroom, saw me doing the Charleston and said, "What's that?" And I told him. And after about half an hour, he learned it. I said, "It's quite simple. You put your left foot out and your right foot out, or something like that, turn around, and don't get 2 feet off the ground, otherwise you'll break your bloody neck," you know, one of those things. And he had a great sense of humour, you see, and he was a great bloke. I used to love him.
Behind the glamour there was hard work, as Tiny Winters recalls.
I used to dabble on the fiddle originally and played the clarinet by ear in a semi-pro band. Then I bought a bass, which I rather liked the sound of, which were just coming in the early 30s. Anyway, I bought this bass, and on my first gig, one of the first gigs was from Tottenham Municipal Hall, where I worked, and I had to get home to Clapton, which was quite a distance, and all the transport had stopped when the dance had finished, and I had to carry the thing all the way home with the help of a fella named Reggie Beard, who he also became a bass player, and we walked all the way from there carrying this bass, because it was, to find a taxi, which incidentally I wouldn't have been able to afford anyway, to find a taxi in Tottenham in 1932, it's like finding a taxi in the Sahara or something like that.
The freelance Tiny Winters, going from gig to gig, one a night if you're lucky, one a month if you're not. Later, of course, as a famous member of a famous band in the 30s, he'd be making £12 to £18 a week, maybe more. When the average working man's wage was perhaps 50 shillings a week, that wasn't bad. But when you weren't making records, fighting off the fans, teaching the Prince of Wales how to dance, or just lugging your double bass home through deserted London like Tiny Winters, how did you relax? Was there a temptation to unwind with the aid of a bottle?
Lou didn't drink, Ambrose didn't drink. They were all tea drinkers. They drank tea like mad. The first thing you looked for if you came out of the cinema after you played the show was a cafe to go and have a cup of tea. This went for night time as well, even when the pubs were open. To emphasise this tea drinking, we were doing a dance, or a ball actually, that was in Paris, and the Duke of Windsor was the guest. And when we had a break in the middle, we were taken outside, and obviously, because we were rather sort of looked on as something a bit special, as Duke of Windsor liked us, and they'd concocted a great big tureen full of pink champagne with wild strawberries floating in it, especially for the band's interval. And the boys looked at all this, and the guy, again, with all the gold braid on him, was just going to serve all this out. And someone said, "Do you think you could get us a cup of tea?"
I like a nice cup of tea in the morning, or to start the day, you see. And at 11:30, well, my idea of heaven is a nice cup of tea. I like a nice cup of tea with my dinner, and a nice cup of tea with my tea. And when it's time for bed, there's a lot to be said for a nice cup of tea.
Tea, which kept the bands going, and a few years later did a good deal towards winning a war. Recognised George Elric, by the way, there with Henry Hall's band. No excessive boozing then. So what did they do with their money? Nat Temple was one of the careful ones.
In those days, if you hit the big time, when you made X amount of money, by the time you'd dined well, had a good car, and everything else, you still had a lot of money, and paid your taxes, you still had a lot of money over. Now that doesn't exist today. By having a lot of money over in those days, what are you going to do with it? The future looked all right. So you had all that money over, so you did this extravagance, and you gambled here, and you lived high, and you entertained well, and lived high, etc.
None of them owned yachts. The only one I know of that owned a yacht was Billy Cotton. He was one of the few that did that. But the others didn't spend their money on yachts or anything like that. It's hard, I don't know really what they did. They just wasted it, I suppose.
Harry Roy wasted it. He says so himself.
I'm afraid I gambled it all away. I gambled with farthings when I was a kid. I've always been a gambler, but little things. Oh yes, so when I worked in my brother's band in 27, I used to get £35 a week then, and used to lose a lot by Friday night when we got paid. Up to 1939, I lost $250,000. And during the war, when everybody's getting killed, I went mad and lost a lot. Horses, dogs, golf, chamois, cards. I mean, I used to put £500 on a horse, £1,000 on a horse, and lose £5,000 in one night in the south of France. But it didn't matter because I knew that I'll get it back working next week or the week after, what have you. And money meant nothing because, you feel that, you've got many years to go, Roy, you go on, and so what? So you haven't got a lot of money, you're enjoying yourself. Well, I thought that was enjoyment. And then I found time to, make love occasionally. That used to stop me from wondering why I lost that money that night. When I used to gamble in the south of France, you had the atmosphere, you had the sea, you had all the things that really why you went to south of France. And then you go to the casino and you swank and you find all the band leaders and all the people that won you at the Mayfair, and you gamble and you wouldn't give in, and you go bunco, and I bunkered once 20 times, trying to get my money back. It was only £20, but it finished up, it cost me £10,000 trying to get it back.
I remember one night I was over at Monte Carlo, and there was a British band playing at the Sporting Casino. I lived right next door in the Beach Hotel, and one evening I went over to do my nightly gambling, and I bumped into this band leader while I was going in. He was coming out through the swinging doors, and I said, "Well, how did you do tonight?" And he said, "Well, Roy," he said, "just murder." He said, "I just lost over £30,000 tonight."
Easy come, easy go. 1 week later, that same band leader bought a Rolls-Royce and drove it up and down Mayfair to show that he wasn't beaten. Since then he's been through a couple of fortunes, and he still wears handmade shirts.
We're in the money, we're in the money. We've got a lot of what it takes to get along. We're in the money, the skies are sunny. Oh man, depression, you are through, you done us wrong. We never see a headline about a bread line today. And when we see the landlord, we can look that guy right in the eye. We're in the money, come on my honey. Let's spend it, lend it, send it rolling along.
But even a golden age has to end. Perhaps especially a golden age must end. With the outbreak of the Second World War, with the Blitz, the blackout and the call-up, the bands disintegrated, most of them never to reform. Why did the big band die? Well, there were a dozen valid reasons, none of them unexpected. Economically, it was never really on to carry around 20 men and a girl, plus stage directors and road managers, when it only takes a pianist to play your favourite tune and a single front-cloth comic to make you laugh. The best stage entertainment in 1935 was probably the Jack Hilton Show. By 1945 it was the Bob Hope Show. 3 saxes, 3 brass and 3 rhythm couldn't compete with Danny Kaye. And the sweetest music this side of heaven was no match for Spike Jones and his City Slickers. The world of entertainment, as usual, had moved on. So that song is ended, though the melody does rather linger on.
New Year's Eve at the Grosvenor House. Nobody knew, it was only at the last minute, that they said, Harry, would you like to play New Year's Eve at the Grosvenor House? And we're fed up with groups, and we'd like you to just come in and play for half an hour or an hour Dick Slam music. I said yes. And we went there and we slaved them. They cheered and clapped like mad, and they all came round. Anyway, they knew me. As soon as we started playing, they knew me somehow. Bugle Rag we started off with. We finished with Tiger Rag, which they remembered. We did Tiptoes with the Tulips. They did things I used to sing, By Me a Mr. Shane, they all sang it, and Georgia and all the things that still popular today. We played and they loved it.
Mr. Shane, please let me explain. By mere Mr. Shane means that you're grand. Or by mere Mr. Shane, again I'll explain. It means you're the fairest in the land. I could say Feller, even say wunderbar. Each language only helps me tell you how grand you are. I've tried to explain by mere Mr. Shane. So kiss me, and say you understand.
Nostalgia. Yes, schmaltz. There's no need to be afraid of it either. In fact, there are many worse things to enjoy. No, there isn't going to be a big band revival. Why should there be? They've had their day. They couldn't operate anyway under the economic structure of the modern music business. So kiss the band leader goodbye, and thank him for making your pleasure his pleasure through those golden years. The years when dancing couples actually touched as they danced, when fresh strawberries floated in the pink champagne, and when a Yiddisher boy taught the son of a king how to Charleston.